Everybody, welcome back to Advocacy Help Desk. Obviously, we are a podcast and video cast trying to help people think a little bit differently in the advocacy space about advocacy, about government relations, about member engagement, about grassroots, trying to eliminate that group think and give you some new ideas and tips and best practices to help improve your game and really kind of drive improvement and build your communities around your issues. So today I'm really excited to have one of my best friends, Ryan Hamilton, to join us today. Ryan, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good considering the circumstances.
Yeah, I am sure you are. Ryan is, the reason why we had Ryan on today is one, Ryan worked in Congress for several years for members, both in terms of being a policymaker, but also ledge counsel for a member of Congress for, I think, 3 or 4 years. He then transitioned and moved to Minnesota, where he was working for the Realtors Association. So he not only has the background as a policy maker and a policy perspective, but also in terms of advocacy. And most importantly right now is he lives downtown Minneapolis, where kind of ground zero of the action has happened over the past week due to the tragic, perhaps we should say murder of a black man in Minnesota, and led to subsequent riots throughout the city there and throughout the country. So Ryan, teeing all that up, maybe tell us really quickly what the vibe is in downtown Minneapolis, what you're concerned with happening.
Sure. So yesterday we had a lot of, it was the public memorial for George Floyd, who was the gentleman who was killed. So Al Sharpton was here, some cultural celebrities, political leaders. It was the formal memorial service for the family, obviously. You know, the whole thing, the parade, the hearse, the casket was on display. That was at a small, I think it was a university here in town, downtown, Christian University. And outside, they were broadcasting it outside to a broader public. So long story short, things are becoming more peaceful. It's becoming more reflective of a loss of life. And that's been winding down. It seems like the National Guard's been pulling out over the past day or two. So I think the peak of what I call the insanity was maybe Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Then they kicked in a curfew, I think, Thursday night or Friday night. And since Saturday, the curfew has been, started at 8 p.m. and now it goes up, 9, 10. So just been a gradual easing of the insanity, restoration of safety and order. And now I think people are starting to kind of reflect again on a tragic loss of life. So I guess we're getting back to our humanity. I'll be completely honest and vulnerable about that. People had gone insane, and now we're getting back to our humanity.
So after the death, obviously there was a number of peaceful protests that started, and then all of a sudden it went into this chaotic mode.
Yeah, exactly.
And you have, we've talked over the phone, and I've checked in with you and your family, and thank God they're safe, and thank God you're safe and your property and many other people around your area in downtown remain safe. But, we were talking just about outside agitators coming in. You believe that, but just the general veracity of how fast it escalated and how it kind of spread across the country at this point. Is that in one sense, we understand the continued fight for inequality, the continued fight for around inequality, about equality, these issues. The Black Lives Matter movement seemed to have sputtered out. We had a big movement a while back. It's continued there, but it hasn't been forefront. And then all of a sudden this energizes it. So maybe from your perspective, tell me, segment the movement itself from kind of the chaos that ensued in Minneapolis. Kind of give us the play-by-play.
Yeah, and when I say insane, and I use that term insanity, I don't mean that in a judgmental way. I mean insanity in terms of, at least in Minnesota, there's been, the racism here is kind of it's kind of covert, and there are just some statistical disparities that have borne that out. So there's been an underlying rage, an underlying frustration of whole communities being treated or feeling as they're treated as second-class citizens. I don't know if you were aware of Philando Castile. Does that name ring a bell? That was a huge one. Philando Castile was a gentleman who was driving with his girlfriend and daughter and was shot during a routine traffic stop by a police officer. Philando Castile when he was pulled over, the normal, hey, license, whatever. And Philando, he had a pistol in the car, but he had a conceal and carry permit. So he had a registered pistol. He had gone through all the right steps. As a black man, he did all the right things to arm himself in the Second Amendment right. And he tells the officer that, he said, just so you know, I do have a pistol in the car. And the officer just snaps. Again, the insanity. Just don't pull it out. Don't move. Give me your license. Keep your hands, the conflicting commands. Long story short, the officer shoots the guy when he reaches for his driver's license. This is with a little girl in the back,
I do remember that, yep.
Yeah, so that was only, 3 or 4 years ago. And a lot of people feel that never got properly resolved. That officer wound up being acquitted. He was arrested, but he went through the judicial process, but he wound up being acquitted, and a lot of people feel that wasn't a just result. But even more than just what happened to the officer and those consequences, the policy never changed in terms of policing and how, just there was no concrete policy changes in terms of the police minority interaction.
It's kind of targeting. It's kind of targeting policing and then aggressive policing, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there's that. So, and then, before the grass is even grown on Mr. Philando's grave, we have another one. So this town's been a powder keg, and that's what I mean by the insanity. When as human beings, you keep back into a corner, you're going to snap at some point. And I think that's what happened last week. Now, Black Lives Matter, I think we got to separate Black Lives Matter as a humanitarian concept versus Black Lives Matter as a political organization. So lowercase BLM versus uppercase BLM. Just like, a Republican's form of government. Everybody is Republicans, big R, right? Or democratic principles. That doesn't mean everybody's a Democrat, big D. So I think those are the BLM as a concept of people with darks, people of color. Yeah, our lives do matter in terms of we just can't be just the indiscriminate killing, If you're a suspect of a crime, whether it be Mr. Castile or Mr. Floyd, who apparently allegedly tried to pass a $20 bill, that's not a capital crime, And then you get Dylan Roof, who they took him to Burger King, in South Carolina. So that's the lives matter. It's just the valuation and perception of how you deal with someone based on their skin color, right? So for the standard to be a suspect and not make it to the jailhouse and not make it to your day in court because an officer killed you in the street, that's leading people of color to believe that, this system does not believe our lives matter. We're treated like chattels still. So we got to separate that concept from the political movement of Black Lives Matter.
So when we talk about the political movement, let's dive into that too, and then we'll get into the advocacy side and some of that. But I also want to point out Ryan is a leading thinker on diversity because it's his day job at University of Minnesota, where he is a diversity manager. And I guess it's for the service providers. Is that correct? Making sure that whoever's providing services to you.
Yeah. So the University of Minnesota spends hundreds of millions of dollars a year to keep that show going. And this was a top down. Obviously, probably from community suggestion, but this is a board of regents. It's from our board has implemented what's called. Has engaged in the concept of supplier diversity and created the program I manage, which is called the Targeted Business Program. Mm-hmm. And my job is just to increase the percentage of the university spending that's going towards women-owned, minority-owned, and disabled-owned businesses. So that's goods and services and construction. We do pretty well in construction. We're above 20% of our construction spend is with minority, women, diverse businesses. And I've been brought in to kind of help. We're lagging, I believe, in the goods and services. We're under 5%. So,
but if the Regents is up there, and this is an important thing to talk about in an organization.
Yeah.
If the board is backing this, it becomes a cultural standard, right? It's not a bubble up. And I think that's the big difference we see in a lot of organizations and companies is we see a lot of statements from white CEOs or presidents about what's happening. And they set the standard for what they think diversity should be versus listening to who is actually diverse in the university or in the companies themselves, the workers, as well as looking at the board level and saying, if we're really putting out these statements and believe in it, shouldn't there be something at the board level that what's the KPI for diversity in our companies these days?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't have taken the job if it wasn't from the board because, again, if there's no backing from the top, having a background in policy and knowing the system, if it's not coming from the top, then you got to be suspicious. So, we have to make a report every year to the Board of Regents and, hey, where are we at with our numbers on our diverse spend? So, so now it's building the infrastructure. So on both sides, like awareness. See, the thing about U of M is it's very decentralized. So the power of the purchase lies in many hands. There's thousands of people with P cards or directors with their small budgets and fiefdoms. So it's I got to kind of go,
you got to do a lot of work.
It's a lot of house to house fighting. It's, me and my analogies, man. It's like, it's the 101st Airborne in Belgium. It's house to house, man. I can't just do these broad things, and because again, I'm trying to convince someone on how to spend their money, and that kind of gets into I think what we're going to talk about too today, and that's very interpersonal in my opinion.
Yeah. So let's talk about like the political movement of Black Lives Matters and the whole kind of equality movement that we now see. We see protest movements across the U.S., but I think the challenge with Black Lives Matter with its continuation was, and you've said this when we talked on the phone, was that it just didn't pivot into an actual policy space where they were actually making specific requests. It just became a continual advocacy movement in some sense, which is important.
Sure.
But they never came up. And I think the difference now is obviously you have a wider number of people. I actually think the first time we started having the debates around Black Lives Matter, you had a whole lot of white people who were saying all lives matter.
Yeah. And
I think there is a pivot now to where you see a lot of white people saying Black lives do matter. There may be something to this. And it's like a ha-ha moment for a lot of people, which should have happened previously, but it's happening now. That's reality where we're at. But I've seen a lot of policy points start to come out, and I'll appreciate your viewpoints, but talking about stripping out this idea that police officers cannot get sued because of qualified immunity, talking about how mayors review aggressive policing, aggressive force that they use. To your point, when you were talking previously, like if it's a routine traffic stop or if a guy's trying to pass off a $20 bill, that is not a $20 bill.
Yeah, to throw in a legal concept with the standard of care. The standard of care should be suspect should make it to the station house in one piece, and if you deviate from that, we're going to assume that something went terribly wrong.
Right.
There's some liability there.
Right. So these are like, do you have any other ideas or things that you've heard of or talked about where we actually see?
Yeah. See, just like, diversity, changing diversity and spending habits, it's interpersonal. We can't do these broad all politics is local. So in Minneapolis, the police officer, they changed the law maybe, I want to say in the 90s. The police force is not required to live in the jurisdictions in which they serve. So you get a lot of suburban and ex-serving cops
That's interesting.
that are driving in every morning into the hood as an occupying force, and I'm not going to assume this, but, there's got to be one or two. We've seen it. Like, I'm going to drive into the city to bash some heads, that mentality. And that's not really, that's not serving and protecting,
Right.
That's occupying for, or who are you protecting? You're just trying to keep the people of color contained. We're not going out there anyway, so why are you driving in town to bash our heads? So maybe that's a concrete policy example of, hey, let's go back to requiring Minneapolis cops to have a residence in Minneapolis, right? When you know that your neighbor's looking at you, or it creates an opportunity for more interaction, and you're comfortable with people that maybe don't look like you, that whole thing. So I don't know in other cities what the dynamics are, right? Mm-hmm. So it's got to be each community has to decide for themselves what's maybe broken and what needs to be changed. The all lives matter, yeah, I mean, that can go in circles, right? Because all lives matter. Well, yeah, Black people are included in that. So therefore, yeah, Black lives matter too. It all goes back to the same place. I think the all lives matter was maybe a backlash to maybe some of the political rhetoric that was coming from capital BLM. People just weren't there yet to kind of subscribe to some of the things that, maybe were coming out of that. So the backlash was to say, well, all lives matter, because they don't want to, maybe they were still wrestling with the humanity of it versus the politics of it.
Right.
So I don't actually know much. When I see Black Lives Matter, I just instantly go to the humanitarian part of it. Yeah, there is some hypocrisy in this country in terms of how our systems are applied to a segment of its citizens. So and people just aren't treated. Human dignity is being robbed in many cases. Therefore, we need to remind people that our lives are valuable.
Well, I think in saying all that, it makes me think like we have, it's just like every political system we have, right?
Yeah.
We have these parties and these movements.
Yeah.
But in actuality, very little gets done through some of these.
Yeah.
Parties,
now, when Black Lives Matter, issues a statement from capital BLM, we need to abolish police, or we want reparations. See, now I'm like, that's political. So I'm like, I don't know. People have to decide for themselves,
right,
if they're going to subscribe to that.
Right. So I guess the thing is people need to think locally, right? Like we see all these things and we hear all these things, and ultimately the people of the local community still need a police presence for law and order for everyone.
Yeah, what you call it, police or something. You need something. Yeah, that's accountable. But whatever it is, it's got to be accountable.
Right.
Because you can't have little vigilante mobs running around here that go like, I told Melissa the story about where we grew up, upstate Carolinas, right? Or foothills of Carolina during the Revolutionary War. People use the war to settle farm-to-farm beefs. I'm like, oh, I'm going to be a Whig, you're going to be a Tory, They had nothing to do with that. They just wanted, they hated that family over there. Needed to go reason to go round them up, right? So we got to have some accountable law and order. We can't just, no police. So then now gangs can swoop in and take territory. Like somebody's going to have some guns around here. It needs to be structured and ordered.
Right. Right. Let's pivot a little bit and talk about advocacy. First of all, I want to know obviously you work on Capitol Hill, but when you work with the Realtors Association, tell me a little bit about your impression of advocacy, your work on advocacy with them at more the state and local level in Minnesota and Minneapolis.
Yeah.
And then I want to pivot that into diversity. Let's grade advocacy around diversity.
as I look back, associations, I think, are inherently conservative. I guess conservative little c. Like they exist to protect business interests and generally status quo. Is that accurate? I mean,
Yeah, I think that's probably right.
yeah. So they're inherently conservative in that regard. So, because I'm an ideas guy, and I pitch my ball. I had a great relationship with the executive director of the state realtors here, and he's a very open-minded guy, white man from Wisconsin. And I'd pitch him ideas about different things, and he was receptive, but he said, you got to talk to the members. We're a member-run organization. It's not our staff coming up with these ideas and implementing them. At the end of the day, we were beholden to the 17,000 realtors who are inherently conservative. They're just trying to sell houses,
right?
This, that, and the other. They're not really, and if they don't want to rock the boat too much about different things, So we were kind of more of a defensive organization. I feel like most industry associations are more defensive type organizations. So there's that, right? So then you got to decide. Keeps coming back to interpersonal, man. You got to go member by member and try to convince them, do we want to get into this fray of equality and eliminating some of the hypocrisy in the American system.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think ultimately it is a defensive kind of mechanism to support and advocate, and try to pass legislation that helps but doesn't hurt, et cetera.
Yeah.
So I think there is that around like grassroots. What kind of engagement would you guys do? Is it events that you guys did, or calls, or?
Yeah, we did calls to action, and again, it was depending on the legislation that was being proposed at the time. We did have a diversity committee, but again, it's just limited because you don't want. There is a hesitancy because you don't want to alienate. Mm-hmm. Somebody's buying a house. You don't know what their political affiliations are, right? So you don't want to alienate a part of your customer base. Mm-hmm. So therefore, you got to be real careful and little c conservative about what you do publicly.
Right.
So that's the challenge that presidents, staff, and the membership themselves. That's what they're going to have to kind of discern and think about their willingness. Like, is this the right moment for them to be bold? Quite frankly.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about diversity. What's kind of great advocacy with where we're at. I think there's still a large number of C-suite people in advocacy and association world, leaders of associations that are predominantly white, predominantly male still. So I guess I'll get your opinion. I have my own opinions. They're pretty strong. Everybody knows that. But I have the benefit of not being a service provider to associations. I help manage our own association, and so my opinions, I can freely float that out. People can disagree or not, but I think one of the challenges, what we've seen over the past week, are a number of associations putting out statements about not being racist organizations, being anti-racist, or that Black Lives Matter, that we need more equality, which I think is all good. But I think ultimately, like, why are we putting out just statements? Shouldn't we already be there?
What happened? Something happened. It's like, I think we're entering an age of authenticity.
Right.
It might be something Trump said or something.
Well, it's so simple to put out a statement on social media.
Yeah.
That's our statement, and we put this out, and we feel good because
I think as a society, and it might just be the generation, the kids who are in their 20s now, their BS meter is probably they were equipped with some of the most elite BS meters ever installed in human being. You know, I think we're in an age of authenticity. Like, and so whatever an association does, it shouldn't come from the marketing department, right? As this is good strategy to kind of get some, to preserve or gain new market share customers.
But also, in some of these associations, you got a CEO putting it out because that's what CEOs have to do, is they have to be out.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's what if it's not authentic?
Yeah, but I would say, like, why wouldn't you allow, if you have a minority or a Black person on staff, why not allow them to draft it and send it out? Why not, and to your authentic is, we put out this statement, so what's next? What are associations and advocacy leaders doing next?
This touches on something, man, and I'll just be completely honest as a Black professional. If you're one of 9 in the C-suite, you're generally kind of subdued, man. You've made it that far, and you're just trying to keep your job and not rock the boat too much. You don't want to be a capital BLM revolutionary and get labeled and then marginalized in that regard. So to all of a sudden the head come to you, and he hadn't listened to you before, right? You weren't empowered before. Now this tragedy happens. Oh, I need you to write the statement. Come on, man. That's not fair. As opposed to, that's why we need more diversity at the top, so that you got some cover. Quite frankly, if I'm the only person of color, there's some whole organizations where it's only 2 or 3. So of course they're inherently gonna feel kind of small and protective, right? As opposed to if there was a robust, or if that had been promoted throughout, then now when something happens, they can step in and offer a unique or a genuine perspective. I'll let you.
I think part of that too is, so we, obviously we have all these, especially nowadays with the Me Too movement and all these other issues with the workforce harassment or any number of workforce issues. We have really strong HR departments, and just because we have a lot of people in HR doesn't mean it's good HR. But what I've seen is, if you really want diversity to be a key, then you have to have a pathway up to the C-suite. If you're a worker, you have to be able to bypass that HR department and go straight to the top and say, I'm not comfortable. Here's why, and have someone listen. And because a lot of times the HR department there is to filter out, and they use, I'm not hitting on anybody in HR, but they filter out things like, well, is that the intent that person had? Or they're trying to solve the problem without listening to what the cause is or what the situation is. Sometimes their job is to make sure everybody's productive and they're doing what they're supposed to do. And maybe they themselves don't really understand systemic racism or the biases, inherent biases that we have. Because, in terms of diversity in HR, it's actually, I would say it's still in its infancy. I don't think it's really been that robust in a lot of organizations or companies out there. And it's reflective. I mean, we even see this right now happening with Adidas, which is a member of ours, but there's a number of Black professionals within Adidas who say, we keep putting out these statements, but I go to HR because I don't feel comfortable and I don't see anybody else of color in my department. And I feel marginalized. And
it's
really
the tokenism. There's a lot of tokenism going on. And so organizations have to decide, somebody's got to sit down and really look into their heart and mind and say, why am I doing this? Is it just to check the box, or am I really, there's got to have a genuine, it's just got to be, that's all I can come up with now. It's got to be genuine. Like, I want to groom. That's a CEO needs to say, I want to groom my successor. And I'm willing to accept someone of color being the right person for that job.
Right. And I think that's the other thing too, is mentorship, putting people in positions where they can lead.
Exactly.
Helping them grow. And I would say too, we have 2 African-American females on staff, and my mentorship is going to be on marketing and communications, but they also, it's not always going to, like, obviously we're from two different communities to a certain extent, and they'll need to go find mentors in other ways. But we provide the space to say, what do you need? Are you comfortable? If you ever feel like we're, not diverse, or we're insular in some way, or you feel uncomfortable, then you need to speak out, and you create that safe space for them to have that ability, and knowing that they can, but also that we are here to help guide and lead in certain ways, but in other ways, fully cognizant that, they need support and guidance.
Yeah, this is hard, man. It's I don't know the capacity of individual organizations, right? Like, what was my staff? The state staff, the realtors was 15 people? And sometimes I was the only person of color, and sometimes, there was two. And my staff, they treated me like family, There was no racial tension, but just, you still feel kind of lonely and uncomfortable just because you're the only one, despite the great treatment you're receiving. And so I don't want to get it, but at the same time, I don't want to get into quotas, so 12 staff, you got to leave me at least 5 people.
I think that's statement,
you know what I'm saying? But like,
alone, it's important for people to hear that people do feel that way.
Yeah.
We assume that they don't. We assume that we treated you like family. We did this, but it's like, it's still like, there's still this.
It would have been awesome to have another black man in that office, or even black woman in that office. But I can't mandate that. You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm struggling with. So I don't know who applied for those jobs or who even looked in. You know what I'm saying? So that's my message to the folks at the top. Put your decisions where your mouth is. Don't hire somebody who's not qualified. But at the same time, when you're looking at these resumes, just own it. I might have some bias,
Right.
And just own that and be willing to kind of try, lean into that fear, whatever that is, fear, I don't know what it is, just discomfort or just whatever. Say, all right, this person's going to make sure they're qualified, but, I'm going to go in a different direction than kind of what my gut has always told me to go.
Yeah, I always think in terms of.
Does that make any sense?
It does, because if you think of it in terms of culture, right?
Yeah.
If you think in terms of association, corporate, whatever it is, we wanted to build a culture of really productive, top talent people. But in order for us to make sure that we do everything we're supposed to, we actually need to be diverse, because, in the footwear industry, we sell to, a large African-American community. And if we're not, and our members, we have a lot of members, I like more in footwear, but you're representing a large community. And if you're only white people and you're only male.
How about this? Let's challenge association executives. Go back and look at your past 3 or 5 hiring decisions, for top level jobs. Look through those resumes. Who were the final candidates? Of your top 3, were any people of color? And why wasn't that person picked if they were qualified? You don't got to answer to me or Andy, but just look at it and look at yourself. Why did you pick? Why didn't you pick a person of color? And why did you pick? Or they might come back at us and say, "Hey, we didn't get any candidates." That's the other problem too. I always hold my own accountable. We got to be applying for these jobs, and putting ourselves out there, so that we're in the mix. Because I hear that, and that's one of my problems. Not only do I have to convince my buyers on campus to use diverse businesses, I got to go out to the community and build capacity. So we're looking for a custodian for one of our cities or one of our facilities, which is in an urban area, which is in the hood, absolutely, I think there should be a minority business doing that work. But if there's no business out there with capacity to handle a big job like that, what do I do? So we got to get in the game on our side too and build our capacity.
Mm.
And just to maybe kind of skip forward a bit, just to make sure I cover this while I'm on it. I think we got to build pipelines. So we need to start exposing, like, freshmen in college maybe to issue advocacy, to lobbying, working for an association, working on Capitol Hill. That's because, there's always going to be attrition, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we really got to get our farm team up, so to speak. And that's not even necessarily that's just good recruiting and good HR, right?
Right.
Good talent cultivation. So
Right.
There we go.
Well, I think that's the same, in footwear, that's what there's a large number of people in the African-American footwear community that are trying to do that, where they go into colleges and teach people that it's not all about just designing the sneaker or marketing the sneaker, but there's a whole world of supply chain and accounting and great jobs that you can do. And it's just the mindset they're not even aware of the opportunities for them to go into those things. And I think you're right the same way when we were
that touches on the generational, on the societal stuff, the generational wealth, the generational exposure, like certain communities you can be a ball player or a rapper or lawyer, doctor. That's the other professional. You got enough lawyers and doctors. Got enough lawyers for sure.
Ryan is a lawyer, by the way. It's his dad.
Yeah, we got enough lawyers. But supply chain, there's other great jobs other than the ones that have traditionally been told in our community as this is how you get out of the hood. This is how you get into a mainstream America.
Right. Well, for advocacy, it's the same way, because when we're studying political science in college, you just thought, well, I'm going to go to Capitol Hill or I'm going to go to State House. There was no you didn't. I mean, I think lobbyist has a tainted word with young people today, but in terms of advocacy and associations, I mean, I wasn't even aware of those things even people are going to think I'm dumb, but I went to a small school that we didn't even know this.
Yeah, you're right.
So we went to Capitol Hill and we were like, oh, there's all these people coming around.
I knew about lobbyists as an abstract concept, but when you get down to association, understand.
So that's a huge opportunity, and to try to
PACs, that's
exactly. We'll start to wrap up because I know this is going a little bit long, but these are important conversations, and I think these are not always easy conversations for white people to have, but I guarantee they're not easy for Black people to have either, especially when they're talking to white leaders trying to say, like, you need to do some of these things and think about some of these things. It's not, I don't think it's easy conversations for anybody, and it's heartbreaking for what's happening in America right now, but we have to have these conversations and we have to talk about this stuff. And I don't always know the right questions to ask, but I'm sitting here asking the questions as best I can, try to figure out how to help other people think about this, encourage people to have some courage, go out and talk to people. It's not enough to, there's always this quip, it's like, well, I have Black friends, and it's like, well, great. I hope everybody does, but it doesn't mean that we fully understand what's happening or how they feel. And we really have to give space for these conversations, just like today. Like, this is a space where we really talk about this stuff. We don't hold back. It would be a disservice if we held back, if we didn't talk about this stuff. And it's a disservice for association executives and for advocacy leaders running grassroots programs of large groups if they don't have the same conversations and come around and say, we put out this statement, but I really want. And
that's my message. That I want to, the thing that I'd like to offer to your audience is just be authentic, right? Don't just do it. Or I'd rather you just not do anything, to be honest, than just put out a statement with no follow-up action. And so, well, Ryan, what's a good follow-up action? Develop a pipeline until even start in high school or something, where you're bringing kids of color to the Capitol or whatever you're doing. It doesn't have to be the legislative side. There's so many different areas in an industry. Realtors should get should be getting high school kids to be realtors or whatever. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. So, folks, this has been a really good conversation from Minneapolis. I mean, straight from where all this has been emanating from, and the tragic death of George Floyd and many more before him, through a system of inequality that it's not just we don't just look at it in terms of the policing system or the judicial.
Oh, of course not. Of course not.
It's actually complete in society, even into our biases we have with hiring, or with our thought that a statement is enough for what we're doing.
Sure.
We're not racist. Well, congratulations. I hope.
I think too many. The system is based on majority comfort. I'll just put that out there. And I think, and that's the system. That's not necessarily the people. And I think too many good people are just kind of just sitting in their comfort, whereas as opposed to being bold and saying, I'm going to step out of this comfort. It might be uncomfortable to hire somebody that doesn't look like me, but I can look on paper that they're qualified, and I'm going to give it a shot just to get out of my comfort zone. Mm-hmm. And if they suck, if they don't do the job, get them out of there, right? Nobody's advocating for that or for quotas or necessarily even affirmative action. But I think that part is different than stepping out of your comfort and surrounding yourself with people and concepts that maybe not look like you or you've never experienced before. So I think that's the real opportunity. The other thing is, one of your questions I want to make sure we touch on that you sent beforehand is, why is this one different? Mm-hmm. I think it was just the graphic nature in which that man was killed.
Right.
Coupled with, everybody saw it, coupled with no sports, no distractions. We were still kind of stuck at home at the time for Memorial Day. So people had to look at that and and there's nowhere to run. You can't go to the ball game and kind of forget it. So we're kind of having to sit in this discomfort, right? And so I think some eyes are being opened, and folks are like, hey, I'm already uncomfortable, so now I'm going to do something.
Right. Right.
The farce of the American comfort of the majority has kind of been, that bubble's been popped. Mm-hmm. So I think this one may stick more than previous incidents.
Good point. So I think you're exactly right. Absent any other distractions, this is what's on the nightly news running after. I mean, it was just a constant kind of flow, and it is so graphic that it's really painful to watch.
Yeah, it demands a response.
Right.
Yeah,
it's just sad. It's sad for what happened for his family, the community. I would say the last point, and this is the last thing we'll do, and we'll have to hop off because it is going long, but in addition to everything we talked about, creating a space for people to discuss this, especially minorities and associations and doing advocacy, hiring practices, talent pipeline is also this. Encourage your members to go out and get active in the local community. When mayors, county commissioners, sheriffs, et cetera, start looking at reviews, be active and actively tell your members. Like, for example, for footwear, this isn't a typical thing that we're on trade, we're on taxes, we're on reforms, but this is something where we'll probably go out to our membership and say, hey, be actively listening to what's happening in your community. When people say they're going to have a hearing, show up. When people say they're going to have a review, show up. Make your voice heard. Don't be silent. If you care about what happened in Minneapolis, if you care what happened in all these other localities across the U.S., it's incumbent upon us to show up and say no more. And that really is beyond the Black Lives Matter movement and all that, to what Ryan is saying is all politics is local. And if you really want to move beyond those statements, all these things, in addition to actually being there and being present, saying things have to change, but it'll only change if you show up. It's kind of like voting. I mean, and we saw this in 2016. Everybody assumed one candidate was going to win, and they didn't. And it really
Politics is local and business is local too, right? You know, like I'm going to spend my money with people who have shown up for me and things I care about. So
great. Well, Ryan, man, thanks for coming on. And you know, again, I'm glad you're safe and your family's safe. And
yeah, thanks, man.
Really sad about what's happening to the community there, both with George Floyd and his family, with the Black community, but also with the looting that took place to some of the businesses there.
Yeah. If one thing I've learned about Minnesotans, though, we're Minnesotans of all races, just because of the winters, I guess, we're pretty hardy people. So we will rebuild, and we'll have you out for a Looms game.
We were planning on it until COVID hit.
We have one of the best soccer stadiums in all of football, my friend.
All right, man. Well, it's good to hear from you. And folks, thanks for watching this latest edition, this special edition of Advocacy Help Desk. Again, these are not easy conversations to always have, but these are 100% necessary conversations to have. And I promise you, if you start having them, they get easier as you go along. You get better as a person. You get better as a professional. Your communities will get better. So please go out there. Let's make advocacy more diverse, like really make it diverse, not just talk about it. And like, let's actually go out to our members and push them to be active in the communities on these issues, even beyond our normal association kind of missions. Let's really kind of make this a movement, and let's really put some oomph behind it. But again, thank you for listening. Be safe out there and keep advocating.